a little bit of the background of what we're going to talk about. The topic of the discussion is green tech in aviation. And as you would have guessed, the larger issue here is climate change. The Conference of the Parties, also popularly known as the COP21 agreement, also known as the Paris Agreement, in 2015 set the ambitious aim of preventing global temperatures from rising 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. At this year's conference in Egypt, signatories affirmed the pledge. Globally, and now let me tell you about how the different sectors share have this ominous contribution to the issue of climate change. The transportation sector is one of the biggest contributors at 16%, within which road transport accounts for the most part at 12%, followed by aviation, which is slightly under 1.9%, and shipping, which is 1.7%. Now, aviation's post-pandemic fast growth makes it a sector under focus for the adoption of green technologies and innovation. We are fortunate to have with us a personality who is a business leader in the aviation sector. He's from Rolls-Royce, whose leadership in aircraft engines and power systems puts the company in the pilot seat in the industry's sustainability journey. On its part, Rolls-Royce has not only made sustainability integral to its vision, it has also backed its commitment to the decarbonization of its key markets. The recent launch of EasyJet, the world's first hydrogen-powered engine, the pioneering of the world's fastest all-electric planes, and the recent collaboration with Neste, the largest SAF producer. SAF stands for Sustainability Aviation Fuel. All these steps and moves testify to the company's resolve to meet the sustainability goals. Now it is an honor to introduce our speaker to you. It is a privilege to have with us Mr. Kishore Jayaraman, OBE, the president of Rolls-Royce, India and South Asia. In his current role, Kishore has been instrumental in driving strategic focus and significant expansion across the company's civil aerospace, defense, and power systems businesses. Prior to joining the company, Kishore had diverse leadership roles across markets at GE for 23 years. Now, you must have noticed, ladies and gentlemen, that I used the abbreviation OBE in my opening introduction when I mentioned Mr. Jayaraman's name. OBE stands for the Officer of the Order of the British Empire, a British Order of Knighthood. In May this year, Kishore was awarded an honorary Officer of the Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I must add here that the Order of the British Empire was established, and for those people who don't know, it's an interesting information. It was established by King George V in 1917, and it is bestowed for meritorious service in peace as well as for gallantry in wartime. Kishore received this award for his services to international trade and investment with a key focus on promotion of India-UK trade. Now, the first question to Kishore is about his perspective on the issue of climate change and that of his company. Over to you, Kishore.
Thank you very much, Anand. That's a very kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. And there is no topic that's close to my heart as sustainability is today. Not only because of this session, but I mean today in the sense of in these times. I think we're all in a journey. And I think if you look at centuries of evolution, you'll find that there's always something or the other that innovation comes about. And there is a disruption that happens. But there is a struggle between evolution and revolution. And I think when we look at it today, we are in a phase where we are trying to forget fossil fuels and we are trying to see how do we live in a better climate, in a better world, in a greener world. And I think it is for the right reasons. It is occupying mind space for a lot of not just industry leaders, but lots of people in government, lots of people in public, lots of people in academia. It not only provides a great opportunity for the future in terms of technology and innovation and jobs, but it also provides a platform where we will all live better. And on that note, I think UN Charter for Net Zero, I think was taken very seriously by our company at Rolls-Royce. And we strongly believe that we have a huge role to play in this. In terms of our role itself, it can be looked at as we have the existing products and services. We are in the process of creating new products and services for the future. And each and every one of these are going to have an impact on the environment. And how we manage that, how we go forward is going to matter to us as a company and as a company with a soul. And I think in that regard, when we looked at it, we said, look, we have to say all our existing products will be compatible by 2025 with alternate fuels. And all the new products that we are building today that we are going to introduce into the market will all be net zero compatible by 2030. It is a very large commitment, given the fact that an aircraft engine, if we start today and say, here's an idea, we want to build an engine, from that point in time to the time that engine flies will be about 10 years. So if we make a wrong decision today, 10 years later when that engine is flying, it'll show up. And if we make a decision that is not for the times of 10 years from today, and we don't go to the future 10 years from today and look back and then design the engine, we'll have an engine that is based on today and not 10 years down the road. So when we look at 10 years down the road, we see sustainability, we see the environment, we see climate change, very, very critical factors for humanity, and we will be a part of it. So we signed up to the UN Net Zero Charter. By 2050, all our products, all our services, everything that we do will be completely compatible with the Net Zero Charter. Now, when we said this, it is an intent. I think a lot of people around the world, a lot of companies around the world went in and gave this intent. And we did too. But we took the intent very seriously. And a lot of other companies have also done it. But in our own areas of aerospace and in power systems, we have made sure that we have an implementation plan to go forward. And that's why we looked at taking it as an evolution, not as an immediate disruption. There are disruption technologies there, but then we have evolutionary technologies like the alternate fuels. Our engines should be compatible on sustainable alternate fuels, and we will do that. We are already in the process of doing it. Very recently, you must have noticed that we had our engines compatible with hydrogen. We could sort of power our engines with hydrogen fuel. And this is not just hydrogen, this is green hydrogen. Right? And we have to start thinking everything. When we talk fuels, we got to talk about green fuels. Because otherwise green power is not there. And if you use fossil fuels in order to sort of charge the batteries and then use the batteries to power, it still doesn't meet the purpose. We have to charge the batteries with green electricity, which means electricity generated by green sources, and then be able to convert that into a fuel source that from the starting point all the way to the delivery point will be green. And so that's what we are working on, and we continue to work on that. And we have partners around the world. This is not a journey where Rolls-Royce says we can do it all. We cannot do it all. We have an engine. And with that engine, we have to figure out who's going to be our ecosystem. We got to have the fuel suppliers who need to generate these alternate fuels. We need to make sure there are consumers who around the world are going to say that we want to fly only with companies that are having sustainable products. We need to have a supply chain base that needs to be built out. We need to have our own people bought into it so that they can keep thinking innovatively. So it's a whole ecosystem that has to be developed. And when the whole ecosystem develops, I think we'll have a greener world into the future. That's our first starting point. But to develop these technologies, we can take years and years and years. Like I said, it takes 10 years to build an engine, or from idea all the way to a flying product. But it can all be done much faster. And it can be done using digital means much quicker, much efficiently, with less wastage. So that is also another critical thing. In order to enable us to attain sustainability much faster or stay with our plan, we have to use our digital resources. So using digital, we have to have methodologies with the ecosystem in order to create sustainability with our existing products. Then we have to disrupt. Now, how do we disrupt? Electrical. Tomorrow's aircraft can actually be all electric. And the key word here is tomorrow. Because today, we have a need for aircrafts that need to fly with the fossil fuel. But we can make it much more efficient, much more reliable with alternate fuels. And as we continue in this journey, we continue to build the electrical aircraft. We've already shown that it can be built. We've shown that it can be flown. We have shown that it can actually achieve speed. Now we have to show distances. Now we have to show the next generation of making sure it's reliable and safe, etc., to carry passengers, which we will do that. But on a large scale, it takes some time. But on a smaller scale, the electrical vertical takeoff and landing, eVTOLs, these are already, we are in a phase where companies like Uber, they want to do air taxi service. There are many other companies like Uber, only one I remember at this particular point in time. Then we have a lot of partnerships that are evolving. Companies like Hyundai, right? Companies like Velocity, I believe. So there are many companies out there that are wanting to partner in order to create all electrical services for the public. And these are not, I'm not talking aircrafts, but I'm talking more like the helicopters. And I think that's also very imminent. It's in the very near future. So there are evolutionary products and services. There are revolutionary products and services. Combination of these two, 2050, the goal is to be completely sustainable. I'll stop there for a second, pause, and see if I've answered that question a little bit for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Kishore. And that brings to mind so many follow-up questions. And the biggest question of the biggest of which is from our readers' point of view, Kishore. As you know, our the readers of the manufacturing magazine that we publish, they come from all the sectors in India, from metalworking, fabrication, right to machine components and automotive. Now, over here, as you know, in India, we have been hearing a lot about sustainability goals, about climate change, and obviously this country, for those who know, has been one of the worst affected in the world. And there is news that the coming year is also going to be not very good in terms of extreme weather events in India. For example, the coming heat wave. Just yesterday, there was this news article about the heat wave, which is going to surpass the survivability limit of humans. But at the same time, there are so many challenges in the industry after the pandemic. Our largest industry, the largest customer for our readers, for example, is the automobile industry. Now that has also suffered. The aviation industry also did not do very well. Now my question to you is, and you've been a prolific writer and speaker, particularly about this topic for a long time. So my question is that why should a worker, a manager, an engineer in India, who's facing so many challenges on the ground in terms of growth, in terms of the post-pandemic demand uncertainty, why should he or she care about the sustainability issue?
Very good question. It's a very tall question there, Anand. But look, I mean, when we look at, I think it's in one way, the pandemic becomes a very good example. Now, when you look at the pandemic, right, we all thought that we have beaten all the viruses, all the bacteria, nothing can touch us. But if you can rewind back to 2020 February, everybody was flying around the world, not a care in the world. Then come around March 20th, you see, India shutting down for the first time, saying Sunday will be a full day of almost a curfew state. And then from Monday onwards, we were all sitting in our houses for about 2 months. And we were all struggling to figure out what really happened. And by the time we could realize what was happening, people were losing lives and, families were in distraught, hospitals were full. It became a burning platform. And the reason for that is because of many different reasons. But as human beings, we tend to become complacent quickly. We tend to assume we are invincible, and we tend to assume that the worst will never happen. But now we look at that experience and we say tomorrow, if climate change is not being addressed, there will be a day where there will be a burning platform. Now we have two choices. We can either go in there and we can say that, sure, I'll wait for the burning platform. Look at what we did at COVID. We created vaccines, we survived, we all battled through it. So that was a very reactive, sort of an approach. But knowing what we know and knowing that burning platforms always exist, black swan events always happen, no, do we really want to sort of put ourselves in a position where we say someday we have a huge issue because of climate change, and today we know that such a thing can happen, and do we want to go to that day and say that I wish I had done something different previously? This is the reason. If this message, individuals as human beings can take it, I think then it's a very simple answer to that. We'll all have to get together and all try to figure out what contribution we can make as an individual in order to make all this work. And it is not going, it is a humanity issue. This is not a single country issue. This is not a single person issue. It is a humanity survival issue at the end of the day. And if you look at it from that lens, we will see that it's a very simple thing. We have only one way forward, and that is to figure out an answer. And to figure out the answer, then we start collaborating. We know that we are not going to all achieve it individually. We're going to waste time individually. Why not all get together? Collective minds, just like what we did during COVID times, collective minds shared between all the governments, political support, economic support, and human support, figure out what the technology requirements would be, what the innovation needs would be, what the skill sets desired would be. The solving the problem is not very hard once we understand what we want to do, once there is a purpose to what we want to achieve here. And I think, to me, we will face that day, and we better start working towards it today. And I think that is the way I think as an individual. And I can say this with full confidence, that's the way we at Rolls-Royce think. And I can say that I hope that everybody in the world thinks this way.
Well, I'm so glad to hear these views from you, Kishore, and not only because they're coming from a business leader of your stature, but also because they represent the views of the aviation sector that pioneers technologies which are then used in other industries. And that is where my next question comes from, is that the aviation industry's share in the overall GHG emission is minuscule in a relative sense. It's about under 2%. But at the same time, the role is huge in how the technologies are pioneered. And that brings to mind, Kishore, something interesting that I recently worked on, is the aviation sector's role in the space sector. All the technologies, the rockets and everything that we see today came basically essentially from the wartime technology of the aviation sector, everything that we see today. And from that context, I want to ask you, Kishore, that how do you see the role of the aviation sector in the overall addressing of this thing, in terms of technology, in terms of initiatives, in terms of putting the right talent on the path to solving this? Kishore.
Yeah, Anand, I think transport sector, aviation is one part of the transport sector, and has a huge role to play in climate change. And as you rightly said, the automotive sector is already moving in that direction. And they are creating hybrid cars, electric cars. And the journey has been no different than the aviation side. And then the ecosystem around it has to be built. And in order to build that ecosystem, yes, there's going to be support required in many different forms. Just like if you take what the automotive industry is doing today, it has to be done in the aviation sector as well. But it is only going to be about 100 times more complicated. And I always say this, between the automotive sector and the aerospace sector, the only difference is when a car goes bad, it can be parked on the side of the road. When an aircraft engine fails, there's no parking spot up there. So I think really whatever we do, whatever we are to achieve, we have to really achieve it within the box, a very, very, very small box, which tells us about the safety of people, about the resilience of the products and services we build within that box. And if we go outside the box, it will create complications that we don't want. And so given that situation, it becomes that much harder to get it done. But nothing is impossible. If we want to do it, we will do it. And we never thought about flying an electric aircraft about 5 or 10 years back. But then we were able to develop that product very quickly and make it take off very quickly. It is not like we will take years and years, 25 years, 30 years. It took 100 years before the Wright brothers, or 19 centuries before the Wright brothers actually flew. And then it took us hardly a century before which we were all kinds of aircrafts, all kinds of fuels, all kinds of aircrafts flying in the air, carrying more than 500 plus passengers on the 308 Airbus 380. So it's like, it's something once we know that we are tipping point and it'll start moving very fast. And I think the aviation sector has a huge role to play, because there is the need for people to move from point A to point B is tremendous these days, whether it be for leisure or for business. And I think, in a world where time is very precious and people are seeing that they can use the time in much better ways than to spend it on going from point A to point B. Aviation sector is here to stay. It'll be bigger aircrafts, faster aircrafts, different types of aircrafts, different types of transport. In that sector, obviously, we have to make sure that there's enough focus put in for sustainability and for products and services that will be greener. So to me, it is a sector that is of huge relevance. It is a sector of huge challenges, but it is a sector with humongous opportunities. It is going to provide opportunities in terms of employment, in terms of education, in terms of innovation, in terms of technology development. It is going to be, when we look at this whole thing 50 years from today, we're going to have a world that is going to be very different in the way we are able to bring complicated solutions, complex solutions that are carbon-free to the world.
Wow. Wow, that's indeed very, very encouraging to hear, Kishore. Now, a related question on technology is that in India, particularly, we are still experimenting and thinking about using different technologies in the automotive sector. For example, the electric vehicles have kind of taken off, but not in the way as they have in other parts of the world. For example, over here, as you know, there are more two-wheelers and three-wheelers using the technology than four-wheelers. Now, when it comes to hydrogen-powered engines or cars, we are still way behind, of course, other countries like Japan, where they have really emphasized on this technology, mostly because this is a very capital-intensive technology to be used on the road. Now, that's the state of the automotive sector. Now, in aviation, Rolls-Royce has taken a leadership position in bringing these technologies to fruition. For example, the recent launch of EasyJet, which is the world's first hydrogen-powered aircraft. Now, these things are already there, and I want to ask this: that what are the different technologies of powering engines, of propulsion systems, and other systems that Rolls-Royce has taken an initiative in that are going to play a role in sustainability? If you could tell us that, and what would you personally bet your money on?
Well, I think I'll stay with the first part of, in terms of products and services, when you look at it, we have the aviation sector, the aerospace sector, and the aerospace sector goes into civil aerospace and defense. And in the civil aerospace side, we are already, like we talked about so far, about sustainable alternate fuels. And then we are looking at probably electric as a primary source for powering the aircraft. So those are there on the aircraft side. Now, when we look at the power generation side, then we would like to optimize the power. Now you have power generation capabilities, which goes between fossil fuels, right, coal-powered, gas-powered, and then you have renewables like solar, wind, and then you have battery, which can also be combined in with the power generation. Then all these are backed up by diesel generators. So you have all these different fuel sources and you have all these different methods of power generation. But how do we make sure that we are optimizing all this usage? It might be it's cost optimization on one side, but it is also about optimizing for sustainability on the other side. The more I can leverage solar power, then the more I probably am turning green. But then if I want to have other sources, if I have fossil fuels and I don't have a choice because there's no sun, then can I store this? Can I store this solar power in some form into a battery? Can I use the battery? If I use the battery, what are the environmental concerns with the battery? These are thinkings that needs to happen, but these can be sort of, put in an island, in different islands, called as microgrids. And the microgrid can be as simple as the office that I'm sitting in right now, to probably a whole ship, to a whole data center, to a whole apartment building, to a whole city. There are many different things. And India, if I looked at it about 10 years, 15 years back when I was in the power sector, I'll say that we were talking about smart grids. We still talk about smart grids. We have started implementing it. It was a visionary statement in those days. Smart grids, everybody was laughing about it, saying, oh, it may not happen, it will not happen. If you look at it in very different forms than 10 years down the road today, there are smart grids. We are talking about smart cities. We are talking about microgrids. We are having that capability everywhere. Rooftop solar is available, batteries are available, fossil fuel power is available, diesel gensets are available. You bring all this together and you optimize it in order to make it very efficient. I think it's not a complicated story there. So you have the pieces already in India. And as much as we'd like to say that, and I love this because everybody complains that India is not doing enough. And I love that part because that tells me that we are not satisfied with what we have, which is a good thing. It is very easy to become complacent and say that, look at all the things we're doing and how great we are. But instead of which, if we go about saying that, I look at them doing this, look at them doing this, as long as we don't take it to say that we are not good, but to say that we need to do more, it is a very nice spirit. And if you look at hybrid cars today, if you look at even taxi service in Delhi, I've seen all electric taxis, right? I mean, these are not concepts I even thought about 5 years back. Yes, the pace of change might be slower than what we want it to be, but the change is here and the change is here to stay. And when it happens, as I say, tipping point is a fantastic phrase or a couple of words there. It doesn't take much once it catches fire that everything turns electric. Today, everybody that I speak to when they buy a car automatically asks the car, should I buy an electric car or a hybrid car? Whether it be that they might get some subsidies in the form of taxes or whether they feel that it is the right thing to do, doesn't matter. But the question is asked. That's a good starting point. When we look at renewable sources of energy, India is not far behind anybody else. Look at the amount of solar. I can only say that, or even 10 years, 12 years back, 2010, if I looked at solar power, I would have said it's impossible in India. It is impossible in India. The cost of manufacturing, the cost of importing, the cost of generation, it's never going to work. But today, I look at it, people only talk about solar power generation. New projects are all solar power. I don't see any other power generation plants coming up today, right? Wind continues to rule. Now we are even talking about small modular reactors, right? The future is going to be about SMRs, and Rolls-Royce is in the space of SMRs. We are developing SMRs, and we are going to be big in that space in the future. And the reason for this is very simple. When we look at a world and we say that, what is the cleaner, greener means of generation of power or for propulsion? What is a cleaner, greener way of propulsion? Nuclear is going to be in that fit. It is going to be in that fit. And if we decide nuclear is going to be in the whole picture, in the whole scheme of things, why is it we won't start today? Why is it we won't put a plan together and we won't figure out what are the things that need to be done in order to make it happen by 2030 or 2035? So we are looking at microgrids. We are looking at SMRs. We are very big into electrical side of things. And the foundation for all this, for all our development work, for all our analysis work, for all our maintenance work will be digital. Right? So we need to have the right people. We need to have the right skills in order to execute that. We need to make sure that the platforms, what I mean by platforms are the products and services, we are clear about what we can do today, which is more of an adjacency from where we are to what we know we can achieve it, and then go ahead to achieve it. Right? I think it's going to be very imperative that we have a plan that brings it all together. Unless we have a plan, we can have an intent. And unless we have a plan and we measure to the plan, and then say, here are the things we would like to do, and this is the reason why we would like to do this, this is where we're going to go, it'll be very hard to keep track, measure, and implement it. We are in the implementation phase. We are beyond the intent phase. We are in the implementation phase. And we will continue to evolve through execution.
Thanks, Kishore. That's another encouraging note. At the same time, the situation in the last 5 to 6 months has not been very encouraging from a global perspective. Now, as we know that we do not have right now the luxury of thinking very long term when we think of renewables and the right energy to go forward. Now, a lot of people have these questions in mind, and I think your best place to address them is that looking at the situation on, of course, everything is geopolitical nowadays, so we cannot escape that. But at the same time, I do understand that you will take a balanced view on this. Is that so? We do not have that much window now. How do you see the situation? Because so far we had the luxury of kind of experimenting and setting targets where we would, but we do not have it right now. We not only have the climate change goals, we also have the fast changing, very rapidly situation in the world, where you have to take your pick to go against away from fossil fuels, for example. So in light of the recent geopolitical developments, without obviously uh, pointing out specifics, how do you feel the climate change goals have changed, and where could it go from an aviation perspective, from a technology perspective, from a renewable energy perspective?
I mean, well, these are two separate segments, right? One is geopolitics, which we continue to have. And I think as long as there are certain things that go above geopolitics, because unless there is a state of war, the human interactions are never going to stop, and the need for human beings in terms of whether it be food items, whether it be relationships, networks, people, these are all not going to change. And even if geopolitics is there, it is through people, and it always comes out with a different outcome, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But what we all need to understand, regardless of what is happening around us, is the fact that we can postpone some things. We can take sustainability today and say that I cannot work on it today because of my burning platform. So during COVID times, maybe it took a little bit of a backseat. But it basically said, I got to create the vaccines. It's a worldwide, it's a pandemic. I got to sort this out. So everybody focused on that. So there can be a short period of time when things get interrupted. But I don't think you can eventually, say that it's not going to come back at all. It is going to have ups and downs a little bit. It is going to be mixed up with many different things. And it is going to have some deviations from as thought out strategies and plans, but that is life. And I think that is how it is going to be, and that is how it will be. And at the end of the day, sustainability, for it to hold together, cannot be just a dream. And sustainability cannot be something that is seen as a nice thing to do. I think it has to be a necessary thing to do. And for companies, it should be a profitable option. The products and services that are developed in order to meet the greener goals of tomorrow definitely have to be profitable. And if they are profitable and they meet the right price point for consumers, then the consumers would love it because it's a better product at an acceptable price point. So I think these are the different parameters that have to go in, but those are all parameters or variables that go in there. But if the whole idea is to say that it is necessary, we have to do it, I cannot see how anything else will stand in the way. And the goals are not very aggressive. I think it's very realistic goals that's being set. And I think, if anything, the way I look at it, I am almost willing to bet that all those goals will be achieved much ahead of the projected timelines. But there are, just like we are human beings, and I think even if it is aggressively pursued, we are not happy about the pace of the pursuit, which is fine, which keeps us on our toes, which is very good. We should do that. But we should not forget that we are already on the journey. The train has left the station. Yes, there might be some unplanned stops, but we will reach our destination.
Great. And we have started to get some questions from the audience. And I would like to inform the audience also that we have Mr. Jayaraman with us until 5 p.m. So please share your questions, as many as you have. And this is being broadcast live. This is being live streamed on Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. You can check our LinkedIn page for all the details and share that with your colleagues. Now, I'm not letting go of Kishore myself as far as asking questions is concerned. Before I put forward the audience questions, I have got couple of them for my editorial requirement. Right. So one obviously is that, see, the industrial ecosystem in India, especially in and around Bangalore, was kind of fortunate to be in close proximity with some of the best aviation aerospace companies in the world, including your company, sir. And you have a joint venture with one of our biggest and most reputed aviation company, public sector company. Now the question is, sir, that that really helped us a lot. That really helped the industry a lot, especially when the automotive industry was going through a churn. Then our suppliers, manufacturers, SMEs, they kind of transitioned their assembly lines, their factories, in order to be able to cater to the aviation and the aerospace industry. That was a big help. In terms of talent also, a lot of engineers who are there in Bangalore and surrounding areas, they got into the sector. They have an aspiration to be in the sector, sir. So my question is that what is your advice to the SMEs, the suppliers who are listening in what direction the aviation industry is going to take from a sustainability perspective? For example, traffic management is a big area. New material is a big area for lighter aircrafts, for example. So if there is somebody who wants to get into this space or who wants to increase their presence in this space, how would sustainability affect our future goals in terms of industrial opportunities? I hope I was able to convey that.
Yeah, I think I understand it. If I don't answer the question properly, we can always try again.
What are the opportunity areas, sir, in light of sustainability being a major issue in aviation?
Understood. Yes. I mean, when I look at it, there's always the stick and the carrot approach, right? So the carrot approach has been that we'll basically talk to people, communicate, collaborate, want to do more, let's do this. And then when the time comes, when things are getting harder and harder and harder, we'll start looking at the stick approach. Simple example is that the pollution in Delhi. Every winter we come to, the air gets polluted, people start having health problems, and immediately there is action taken by government, local bodies, people themselves in trying to figure out how do we live better. And sometimes it is like telling people, okay, we need to make sure that you are able to do this, you're able to do this and that, but when nobody listens to it, then the rules are brought in. There was an odd even scheme that came about, and today there's a scheme of no cars below BS6 can actually fly on the roads. So these are things that are coming about because people are not listening to things. Now, in the field of sustainability, it is similar. I think at some point in time, what will happen is there will be rules and regulations that will keep coming in. And those rules and regulations will continue to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And in the power generation field, in diesel generators, if we have seen, there's a CPCB 4+ ruling that has come about. And what it basically does is any of the diesel backup gensets or diesel power gensets, they have a certain amount of emission norms which have become tighter than before. And so the engine exhaust gases have to be appropriately treated, or the engine itself has to be made more sort of tighter on emissions. So these are all, it is not, we have to see that these are things that are going to come to us. Whether we are an SME or we are a large company, I think these are all things that are going to impact every and any one of our products and services. The quicker we are able to see how it can impact our own little worlds and find a way to mitigate that risk. And the answer always in our minds is, it will not hit me. But I believe that it will hit every one of us in some form or other who is in the industry. And we have to be prepared for it. I mean, it's a very broad question. So if you go from aerospace to automotive, you can't say how it is going to affect who. But all I can say is it's going to affect everyone. And the companies that are able to look at it and say, if it affects me in these different ways, here are my mitigation plans. And here is what my products and services should look like. Here is how my operations should look like. And if you're able to put that plan together and we're able to implement it quickly, some can be implemented very quick, some might take time. If we start ourselves in the journey, we might be better off at the end. The thing is that everybody is going to get to that point. I don't think there is going to be an option. And the sooner we get there, the better it is for all of us. The sooner we plan for it and prepare for it, the better off we will be. And it might just end up being an evolution if it is a plan. It will end up being a disruption if it's a reaction.
So before I take up an audience question, one last question from me, sir, is that in one of your columns for a magazine, for a business magazine, you wrote that leadership is about empowerment. That is the true leadership when you empower people. And I also saw a comment of somebody on that page where you had written this, where your article was published, that I had, and this person had said, anonymous person, that I had the privilege of working with Kishore, and he truly walks the talk when he talks about emotional leadership. And that was a rare thing for me to see in the age of trolling. So that something that has stayed with me. So the question is that about leadership in today's challenging times. How do you see business leadership? What do you think are its primary roles?
Well, I think leadership has not changed a whole lot. I think there are certain fundamentals of leadership, and some of it is to make sure that you're able to learn from the history. History is a good place to begin to say, I don't mean history of, the history of the countries. I mean the history of your own business or your own experience. And to say that based on the history and experiences, what is it that I can learn and adapt myself to? And the second thing is the present. We always have to look at the present and see what is the need of the hour. And definitely we should allocate some time to say what the future holds. And if you're not able to look at what the present situation is by learning from the past, I think our ability to control the future, sort of gets smaller and smaller. But the key word here is control, because there's really no control when it comes to leadership. And control is a luxury in the world of true leadership, is what I completely believe. Because we cannot be an expert in all areas. We have experts who are all collaborating together in an organization for the betterment for the organization. And all those people have expertise in domain. All those people have ability to work as a team. The role of a leader is to be the catalyst that helps increase the pace. And if you're able to think in those terms, I think it becomes a very easy journey. And I've been lucky, and I've been very lucky. I've had great people work with me, for me, and I work for great bosses. And I continue to work for great bosses. So, it can be a lot simpler. In some ways, I ask myself the question, is it luck? Or is it collaborative efforts? Or is it the adaptive abilities? Or is it something else? Bottom line is very much this. As long as we know that we are humans, as long as we know the ground beneath our feet, and we're able to stand firmly every single morning, I think it'll be a great day.
Thanks, Kishore. Now, the next very quick question and the final question from my side is that, which is pertinent to my experience also, is that you are known to be a champion of diversity in STEM fields. That's a very interesting and a very noble goal as far as my point of view goes. Now, the question is that I have personally seen that women and girls are really interested in lending a hand in contributing to addressing the larger issue of climate change. And I know of many girls who wanted to become doctors, which are the traditional goals in India, for example. But they not weird, but they wanted to do environmental science instead of an MBBS. And there are a host of examples. I thought it was because of young activists like Ms. Thurnberg who has entered the field, but it was larger than that. So a lot of girls in this field want to really shoulder this cause. So what is your advice to girls who are entering this field? From a STEM perspective also, and from a climate change perspective, what is it that they can do in the coming years to address this?
I think pursue your passion. And if you're really passionate about the environment and the climate change, then pursue it with all your heart. And I think it's perfect. If you're really a person who wants to go into technology, STEM related activities, fantastic. It doesn't mean that we cannot do it in the realm of technology, the needs of the climate change and the sustainability. I think all these are interlinked. And I think, first of all, what is very important is to do what one likes. And then weave that to say, how is it that the field that they are in can really help the sustainability initiatives? And it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, you're a chartered accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a pharmacist, you're a construction worker. It does not matter, because all of us have the ability and all of us have the need to make the change. And I think we have to just gain the knowledge in our domains and make sure that the knowledge that we are gathering is gathered with sustainability as one part of it. As long as we can get that level of cognizance of the subject, I think we have won 60-70% of the battle. And I think, for us, STEM is very important. We are an industrial technology company. So for us, STEM is extremely important. But when we looked at it, when we tried to hire, we found out it is very hard to find a lot of women and girl students in the STEM areas. And so in order to make sure that we are truly wanting to be a very diverse organization, we have to show that we want to also combine that with our STEM needs and our expertise with the diversity needs and how we will bring these two together. We started all these programs, which will be STEM initiatives for women. And it has been a very good success for us here in India. We wish we can scale it up and we can do much more than what we do today. We always aspire to keep doing more in that area. But the response so far that we've gotten over the last 10 years that we've been doing this has been phenomenal. And we go from every year, we build it from strength to strength. And I think every year, Gayatri, our head of communications, she's very passionate about it. And I think that kind of helps us a lot because she's passionate about it. The need exists. There are people who appreciate it. So it becomes a very easy thing for Rolls-Royce to be that catalyst in this environment. And I believe that tomorrow in the world of sustainability, diversity will play a very key role. And it should always be front and center in what we do, just like sustainability is, diversity has to be.
Great. That's really encouraging to hear because our industry has one of the lowest participation of women in the world. And it's really great to hear from an industry leader, sir. So I'll take up the first question. And Mr. Alok Nayak, so his question, from what I remember, I just saw it flashing on the screen. His question was, sir, that the electrification of planes, would it make sense from a commercial perspective? This was in just what his question was.
Yeah. Eventually, it has to make sense. Okay. Let's put it this way. If you really want to make a difference in climate change and sustainability, it has to make sense. And I can say this with full confidence, it will make sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, there will be an alternate mechanism. Today, using fossil fuels, having the level of emissions that we have today will change. It will start by reducing. It will start by more and more awareness. It will start by more and more technology. It will start by more and more innovations, but it will change. And yes, electric planes will be in the air. The question is when and where. Because the when can be something you can say, okay, I'll do it in 50 years, or you can say in 5 years. But as success happens, just like our first flight happened, I think it's going to build on that success. There's going to be many more successes. each and every success will move it forward to the point eventually we'll have one of these aircrafts flying people around the world. And the eVTOL is a classic example of what will come into the market very quickly. And when the eVTOL comes into the market, then that will have spin-offs from it. And that will actually build more and more and more. So I think, yes, that's a question. No, to answer your question.
Thank you, Kishore. Yes, this is a very exciting topic, and I got hold of the question, and this had an interesting part, which if you would want to address. He gives a scenario wherein, say, if there is 70% adoption of electrification in aviation, then the cost for jet fuel will decrease by a large margin, which would once again pull air carriers to consider fossil fuel over electrification. So, is this a leap of imagination, or do you see this happening because of electrification?
Oh, it'll happen. It'll definitely happen. When the demand goes down and the supply exists, the prices have to come down. But the question is, if we are doing electrification for pure price considerations, then what you're saying there is true. But if we are doing electrification for a much higher purpose, then it doesn't matter at that point, because it's not about price. It's not a cost game. It is about survival. It's about humanity. It's very different.
Awesome. Now, Ms. Khushbu Singh asks, and this is about startups, is that how do you see the future of startups in sustainability in aviation in the future?
Well, I look at crowds, the classic example I like to use here is crowdsourcing. I think startups are great in that point that the ideas of individuals are expressed very quickly because they are in control of their ideas and they build something based on their ideas, which in the framework of a larger organization comes with its own challenges. But in a startup, those large organization challenges are taken away. And so it brings the products and services and the ideas to market faster. And as these are brought to market faster, it enables the larger organizations in whatever their larger goals are to absorb all this, build on it, and be able to serve the needs much faster. And we see that happening everywhere, right? There are many, many, many small startups that happen, and they're all bought over by the big companies. The initial investors are there, and then they move on. The big investors come in, the big organizations take over. So yes, startups is definitely going to be an integral part of this whole evolution. But it has to be an idea, and it has to be a product and service that will happen at pace, will happen in a way that the larger organizations don't have the capability to do it. If multiple people are doing it, then it means it has to come to market fast. If only one person has the idea, then it should be shown that the idea works. So there are challenges, but it's a little different set of challenges. And for organizations to grow, I think it is going to be that large organizations, startups, they all already are together. They'll get even more integrated, I believe.
We have just two more questions. We have many more questions, but I'll just put forth two. Now, Mr. Akash says that there is R&D budget, there is a CSR budget. Should there also be a budget for corporates to achieve sustainability? I think CSR already addresses that, but I think is asking overall from a policy perspective, from a government support perspective. Should the corporates be impelled to work in this direction?
Even if you force people, right? I mean, I think the best way that these things work will be in the form of subsidies, then that's a carrot approach, than in the form of a stick approach. If there are mandates on corporates, some of the corporations can actually meet the mandates and some of them cannot meet the mandates. So you're basically in a situation where it becomes a very, untenable. But if you look at a subsidy and you say, if you are developing this particular product that's more environmentally friendly, then you get these benefits. I think that carrot approach might work much better than to work the approach of the stick, which is to say you're mandated to this. There'll be a time, like what happens in Delhi when the pollution gets really high, there are mandates that come about. And I think there'll be a time, if we don't see enough progress, that there will be mandates that will come about for existing products and services to continue to exist. So I hope that we will start off with a carrot, and I hope we never have to get to the sticks. But eventually, we will use any of these means to get to where we need to get to.
Wonderful. Now, I think this is a great question to round this off with. And Mr. Magesh, who's the founder of Data Mentor, asks, do you see air taxis flying in Indian cities? And if so, by when?
Answer is yes. I don't have a crystal ball to tell you by when.
Awesome, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for this riveting discussion and deep insights that are going to help us all, not only this year, but going forward. It's an awesome start to our conference. Thank you so much for your valued time, sir. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.